I don't want no oil a spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to everyone listening on the internet, wherever and whenever you are. My name is Joseph DeMare, and I'm here with my co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
And together, we're bringing you that inspirational hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a program where we talk about ecology and the environment. We talk about how it affects you, your family, your wealth, your health, your happiness. And this week, environment and ecology, these sort of issues are on people's mind because our wealth and health and happiness are definitely being affected by an ecological principle here. And so we're going to be talking a little bit more about that. We have a great show lined up for you. We're going to be joined around 8:15 by Dr. Halo from Bowling Green State University. And she's not an expert on COVID-19, but she is an expert on virus and host interaction and evolution, the way viruses act in populations.
Which is a good thing to know about, so, the real science, so that you don't panic. And, I mean, a little fear is appropriate here, but, you don't have to get more excited than you have to.
but it often helps to step back and take a look at the bigger picture of viruses and populations in general. It can help you get a perspective.
Right.
And
not just this thing is coming for me. Well, no, it's not. It's just doing its thing,
Yeah, there have been viruses before, and there will be viruses again in the future. And then after that, of course, we'll hear from our wonderful sponsors, and then some environmental news that's in the news that, is trying to peek out from under the news because, of course, the news cycle is being dominated by the one story. But
basically, it's the COVID show now. That's all it is.
Yeah. So we're going to try to get a little more information for you about some environmental stuff going on.
Yay.
And our letter from the future. And then, of course, you may call in at any time at 866-240-1065. That's 866-240-1065. I am Joe DeMare, and I'm your host, and I'm happy to take your call on any ecological or environmental topic. And what I wanted to start out talking about this week before our guest joins us is a little bit of an upbeat note. I think we could all use something kind of upbeat to talk about. And, of course, there is that fact that hope springs eternal. And the reason spring is in there is because you just sort of can't help but be hopeful when you see the signs of spring.
It's one of the few things keeping me going. I take the dog out twice a day, and it helps my morale, I feel,
right
during this time.
And it's a great time. The official start of spring, of course, was 2 days ago, the 19th, and so that means it was spring equinox. So the daylight and the night time were exactly equal as they were all over the world on that one. That's the 2 days of the year that happens.
It's just okay. Is it ever equal at closer to the poles in Norway and places?
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, it's the one day of the year where everybody's got a 12-hour day and a 12-hour night.
But then somehow they have crazy long days and crazy long nights up there eventually.
Right.
That's more at the solstices, though.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. The days are going to be getting insanely longer up farther north you go, and insanely shorter the further south you go. And it's interesting because my son used to live in Alaska. He's moved to Colorado now, which is a lot more reasonable for us. But it was intense to go visit him this time of the year because, well, actually this time of the year was exactly the same.
Right.
Because light and dark were the same
it was
amounts.
Summer and winter when it was weird.
But he gained more daylight faster every day during this next phase, going to the summer solstice. And once the summer solstice was over, they lost daylight a lot quicker, and on the way to this fall equinox, etc. And so that's the cycle that happens every year, just like the cycles of life that happened every year. And this is the time of year where we see the regeneration, see things happening. And so please share with us. Please give us a call at 866-240-1065. What has been your favorite sign of spring so far this year? What have you seen that's kind of been like, oh, it's spring. Oh, yeah, all this stuff is going on, but hey. And, there's lots of sort of examples. There's the birds coming out, the flowers. I see crocuses. I see lots of crocuses about to flower.
Daffodils. I heard birdsong for the first time when I came outside to wait for my ride for the show. So
right. Oh yeah, that would be me.
And you forget how happy that makes you feel. When you haven't heard it for a while.
Mm-hmm. They're advising people. They're saying the one thing you can do is to go outside.
Right.
Keep your distance from other people while you're out there, that 6-foot minimum distance. But it is better for you to go outside. And my wife and I have been doing that. We've been going out, and we actually aren't seeing too many other people out, though. I think most people are not following that advice. It seems like people are just hunkering down in their homes.
Yeah.
Is that what you're doing? 866-240-1065. Are you just hunkering down at home, or have you gotten out and seen some of these wonderful signs of spring?
It's like that with the urban hiking also. It's just about like you got your own private city. And people are being very nice in terms of, people are making a big deal about waving hi to each other, waving and saying hello when they pass each other on the opposite sides of the street. Because It's like, oh, a person. We're all excited to see each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did that last night.
Yeah.
I was on a walk, and somebody I knew was across the street.
Right.
I couldn't help myself. I was like, hi, how you doing? And so that was I guess that's a sign of spring, is seeing other people.
You can still
there.
kind of have your dogs meet, because with the leash distance, if you both are having your dog on a leash, then put together, you can just kind of let them touch noses.
Yeah. Now, I was out and some guy petted my dog at leash length, and I was like, do I have to sterilize my dog when I get home?
I don't think so.
Oh, Russell's nodding. Yes, I should have. Okay, all right. Well,
you just wipe him down anyway.
Yeah, well, it's a
her.
Or
her. That's right. I meant Molly. Yeah.
I guess I should have given her one of those sterile baths, maybe. I don't know. But I'm all right. And so far, almost all of us are. There's 2 reported cases in Toledo so far that I know of. 1 death, unfortunately. But all this quarantining, all this social isolation. Isolation. I'll take credit for that word.
You're suddenly like that dude in Taxi.
Yeah, it seems to be working in this area anyway. We
got to get organized, Joe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So my favorite signs of spring, of course, the robins. The robins are back. I've seen them. Cardinals. We have this family of cardinals. It can't be the same family because they've been in our yard ever since we moved to Bowling Green like 9 years ago. So this must be like a 2nd or 3rd generation. But every year, this really beautiful cardinal sets up in our backyard there, and some of the trees that we let grow along our boundary with the neighbors. And for me, that's it's like, oh, the cardinal's back.
There we go.
It's spring.
Yeah.
How about you? 866-240-1065. Have you seen a sign of spring? Have you seen a sight that would cheer your heart at this time of year? And humans' interaction with nature, that is an extremely healthy thing. It's many studies have shown that it improves your mental clarity. It helps with your mood. It helps fight depression if you get out in nature. Gives you some vitamin D. There's that vitamin D.
Nothing wrong with that.
People have been talking about that too. So, what has been your personal spring experience so far, or have you not had one? Have you just literally hunkered down in your apartment and then just close the blinds?
It's a very hard time for people because most people who are not hardcore introverts are used to a lot more interaction than this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's even I'm an introvert and I don't have money to do things and I don't have a car. But just the fact that in a couple of weeks there's going to be an event and I can go be around people. You see, that was important to me. I think this is what this is proving, is that how social interaction is kind of a staple for us. It's something that we really need.
Yeah, it is a very basic human need.
And when you have to do without it, it's very hard.
Yeah, it's like food and water. I mean,
right.
That's why isolation, when people are in prison and they're put in solitaire, that is such a terrible, cruel, and unusual punishment.
People are really never the same after that. It's just bad stuff to your head.
So don't put yourself in solitaire. The parks are still open, although the playgrounds are closed and the park offices are closed. But you can go on the trails, you can get your sun, you can go see the creatures that are around you, and you can basically still revel in the hope and joy of spring, even though the news is so dire. It's just a reminder that, life will go on, that things are going to continue, and we are going to continue bringing you the kinds of information you need, the kinds of information you're not going to get anywhere else here on For a Green Future. And helping us with that endeavor is our special guest, and I believe we have been joined by Dr. Halo. Dr. Halo, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good morning, and thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us here on For a Green Future. Dr. Halo, could you first tell us a little bit about your credentials, what you do, where you're from, who you're with, etc.?
Well, I was born in Pittsburgh, so
okay.
And I did my undergraduate at the University of Pittsburgh. I have a master's from Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, and then I went to Boston to do a PhD at Tufts University. I did my postdoc at Michigan, and then I ended up at Bowling Green State, just down the road from you guys.
Oh, that's great. And what's your PhD in?
I think officially my PhD is in molecular microbiology, so all of my degrees are in microbiology. The research that I do now is more genomics-based, and it's sort of tying mammalian genomes in with viral genomes.
Aha. So that's very interesting, and that's why we've asked you on the show today. I was just kind of, for our audience, let's start with a general situation, a big picture sort of thing. The evolution of viruses and hosts, when we have a virus that gets into a new population, is it sort of predictable how they behave, or does every virus behave differently, or are there some general things that usually happen when new viruses come into populations?
So, generally speaking, when a new virus comes into a population, it tends to be a little bit more virulent, and over time, it evolves within that population. The virus is continually evolving, and it becomes less virulent. It becomes more, say, negotiable within the population. So that's, very generally speaking. I think, anytime that we see an outbreak, sort of like what is happening now, this is something that's very new, and it's not something that, the population is used to or has been exposed to before. And also, because we are humans and we think and we have mentalities, it's something to cope with, so there are a lot of factors going into what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so something to brag about there a little bit, our intellect, I mean, the other animals may not listen while we brag about it, but
no, they're just like, where are my snacks?
Yeah, but at least we have it. At least we have these brains that we can do things with, and that is kind of an interesting I've been thinking about that, the fact that we have modified our behaviors so radically, so quickly in response to this thing. It's kind of a testament to something there, something good, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So you say over time the viruses and the hosts kind of evolve together.
Yes.
And sort of reach like a sort of a truce, I guess, with each other, you might almost say, or a de-escalation.
I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't know that I would say a truce, but I kind of like the use of the word de-escalation. In virology, we refer to this as the virus host arms race, and you can imagine a superhero and a villain, and they're going against one another, and they can accommodate, to their enemy and to the task at hand. And so, when a virus affects a cell, it has to get into the cell, so it has to recognize a certain protein on the surface of the cell. And so that protein could maybe not be recognized, or it could evolve a little bit to not be recognized, or there could be a mutation underlying in the population already that it's resistant to the virus. And so you already have this sort of bell curve, of a receptor that's in the population. And so then that is under selection by the virus. And then in turn, the virus can change, and viruses mutate rather quickly, compared to our own genomes, especially RNA viruses. And the coronavirus is an RNA virus. And so they mutate very quickly, and they can adapt to either, respond better to that receptor or to do better within the cell. And so then the cell, which is, say, us or a mammalian host, will do the same thing, and they'll come back and they will respond in some way. And it's not that it's a directed response, but it's evolvable, right? So it's evolution over time.
Well, that's cool. That gives us some hope there. I mean that the fact that viruses have entered the population before, and humans have gone through this process you described of co-evolving, of adapting and strengthening, and so we'll get through this one too. I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we will.
All right, that's great. So I know you're not an expert on COVID-19 specifically, but
no.
Right. But have you got any observations about the current situation, based on your knowledge and experience that you'd like to share?
Well, I think, to be honest, and on somewhat of a comforting level, my observations are much of what the public is observing. One of the hats that I wear is virologist, and I know a lot about viruses, but when something like this happens, it is novel. It is something very new, and it's unprecedented. And as my ladies' breakfast group has been saying, this breeds innovation. And so good things will come from this, but there is challenge that is ahead. As far as from a scientific standpoint, I think that the measures that we're taking right now are extreme, but I hesitate to say that they are necessary, but I think that they will be very, very helpful in this, what's become now a coined term, flattening the curve. This is a real thing, and I think that this will aid very much in it.
Okay, good. So now you mentioned this is an RNA virus, but I guess that suggests that there's also DNA viruses.
Yes.
And so could you just talk a little bit about the difference between an RNA and a DNA virus?
Sure. Why don't we take it back to the difference between RNA and DNA? So I hope that most people have heard about DNA, right? So DNA is what all of our genomes are made of. And it's just one type of nucleic acid. RNA is just another type of nucleic acid. And so RNA is extremely similar to DNA, almost identical, except for just a couple little molecular structures that differ. And so for all purposes, RNA can store genetic information just like DNA can. It's not more, DNA is much more common as a storage unit for genetic information, but RNA can store this information also. And so while we have genomes that are all made of DNA, all made of double-stranded DNA, viruses have also evolved to be either DNA or RNA viruses. And so the coronavirus that is going around the globe right now is an RNA virus, and so it's a single-stranded RNA virus.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, so we're double-stranded DNA because we're such complicated creatures. We have to have all these instructions in us in order to copy ourselves. But this virus is just a single-strand RNA, so it's a lot simpler. That's sort of one way to look at it. I always err on the side that none is simpler. None is more complex and none is simpler. When we think of viruses, I think that I work with retroviruses. That is my specialty. And when I mention retroviruses to people or to my students, what I first often hear is everyone says HIV. And, so HIV is the retrovirus that people most know as that is a retrovirus, if they know what a retrovirus is. Now, HIV is also a single-stranded RNA virus. And would I call HIV any less complex than we are? I certainly wouldn't. And in fact, we can split viruses into simple viruses and complex viruses. And HIV qualifies as a complex virus, so so it is also a single-stranded RNA virus. Interesting. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about your research specifically. I came across a paper on the internet that you helped with that talks about something that I think most people don't realize, the idea that we are actually all part virus.
Yes, this is true.
Yeah.
We're actually a more significant part virus than most of anybody would probably think. Our genome has been derived from about 8% of viruses.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some news for you. Yeah. You're 8% virus. Okay. Go on.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you actually take into account just our protein coding genes, so just the genes that code for actual proteins, we're at about 1.5%, 2% of our DNA. Okay. And then there's vast amounts of DNA that are regulatory. So most of the vast majority of the viral DNA that's in our genomes is it's from retroviruses. And so when a retrovirus infects a cell, it's a single-stranded RNA genome. It carries 2 copies of that genome in each little virion that's going to be infectious. And it is what we call reverse transcribed, right? So it's RNA, and we have DNA genomes, and so in order to be recognized by our own cell machinery, it has to be DNA also. And so it is what we call reverse transcribed into a DNA copy, and then the copy of that RNA genome is permanently integrated into the host cell. So this is one of the reasons why HIV has been so challenging to find, to be able to develop a vaccine for it or a cure for it, because it permanently integrates into the host. And so once it does that, then it can go, everything is there. It carries everything with it in that genome to be, replicated by the host cell machinery. So, a great evolution there, right? So the virus carries everything that it needs in its RNA genome to be copied into DNA, inserted into the host genome, and then be expressed. Mm-hmm. And so the viruses that I study, though, were past germline infections. And so these viruses, they infected sperm cells and egg cells, or very, very early in embryogenesis, right? So that actually sounds kind of scary, right?
Yeah, a little.
Viruses going around and infecting your gamete cells. And so, but, it did occur, and it occurred, quite abundantly. We all share, everybody on planet Earth right now shares at least, a couple 100,000 of these integrations, which means our most common recent ancestor all shared those integrations, right? So it's a little bit mind-blowing whenever you think about it. Mm-hmm. And so these particular insertions, some of them have been sort of borrowed evolutionarily, right? So we take a virus, and it's sort of a foreign, you can say that they have sort of foreign genes because they're viral genes. They're not mammalian genes. And so we take these viral genes, and then you throw them into a regular human being. And now this, much like the situation that we're in, it breeds innovation, right? So it allows a new template for evolution to work on. And so this is what has happened in our past. And so things like viral genes that we have and that other mammals have been co-opted for things like resistance, right? So they can express a certain protein from the virus that is then, goes up to the cell surface on the host cell and binds other proteins, and all of a sudden that cell is now resistant to infection by the same virus. And that there's other things that they've been co-opted for as well. I mean, so it's some of them they're literally mind-blowing.
So it's kind of like, this is my cell. Any new members of my species stay out.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That is interesting, right?
Yes, bacteria actually do a very similar thing. If a bacteria is infected by a bacteriophage, it's just another word for bacteriovirus. They express certain proteins that limit infection, and it's called a limitation to superinfection. So you prevent it and you're resistant.
Mm-hmm. So the research paper I was looking at, you looked at human genomes, at examples of a lot of human genomes, and you found a whole bunch of these viruses that hadn't been expressed before. And you said there was even one that was like the viral DNA was almost fully intact, and that
yes.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about that?
I can. That was a really great project. Like, that was like, if I could just, any project, it just makes me smile and feel good whenever I think about it. When I was a graduate student at Tufts, one of the things that I was very interested in finding was sort of new copies of these genomic viruses, so that have embedded their DNA in our own viruses in humans. And so I sort of did some of that while I was at Tufts as a graduate student. And then whenever I went to Michigan, I worked for a PI that had access to the 1,000 Genomes Project. And the 1,000 Genomes Project it's a global sampling DNA sequencing project, so genome sequencing on global levels in the thousands. And so we had access all of a sudden to about 2,500 genomes, from a global population. Mm-hmm. And we had some additional genomes that we had access to already also.
So now these are individual people whose full genetic thing, there's full genetics have been cataloged? Is that what
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
That's exactly what that is, yeah.
Okay.
So we have about 2,550 genomes, and now we have the ability to computationally ask, based on all of the DNA that we have sequenced there. All right, now can we look for signals in all of these genomes that will give us a hint that maybe there is a copy of this particular virus in this genome? So that's exactly what we did, and we found, in addition to some of the newer copies that we knew about, we found an additional 36 copies. And so then we sequenced them and we annotated them. And one of them did seem, for all intents and purposes, it has what we call open reading frames, which means that the gene reading frames are actually intact. It looks like it codes for all of the proteins that it would need to replicate within a cell. So this is a little bit alarming, right? So wait a minute, there are people on the planet that have, somewhat, and I'm air quoting here, intact, viruses within their genomes. But in fact, we did take it further, and this was done at Tufts also by somebody. The other co-author on the paper with me, Zachary Williams. So he did actually clone out some of those genes, and he tested them, and they are not, in fact, functional.
Okay.
But
well, that's good.
But
so they're permanently dormant as far as you know.
Yeah, because that's the basis of a lot of very scary movies, what you just described.
Well, actually, that's funny. He tagged me in Facebook last week, and it says, if the quarantine's long enough, maybe I'll be able to finish the terrible pandemic thriller novel somebody wrote based on this research. It's a book called, I'll give her a plug, it's a book called Maze Master by Kathleen O'Neill Gear, and she quotes our paper in the intro, saying that was the paper that, so she gives us a citation.
There you go.
So I was joking when I said, well, I'm going to add that to my website. I have to give her a plug.
Fiction following fact there. Okay.
Yeah. But so to more answer your question, so it's very interesting. They're dormant as far as viral replication is concerned. But like I said, we also have copies of different, we call them endogenous retroviruses. So we have copies of different types of these viruses that we've borrowed evolutionarily, right? And so we've borrowed them for things like gene regulation, right? So they can affect transcription of genes, right? So expression of genes, because they carry their own set of their own DNA is recognized by cellular machinery.
Uh-huh.
And so this brings into a more, where do we go with this type of research? Well, many of these copies are expressed in disease. And so they're thought of, they could be sort of a biomarker for disease, or their proteins could be somehow affecting the progression of disease within a cellular state. So there's a lot of research that is going on with that. So as far as dormant is considered, they're not quite dormant because they are expressed in some instances.
I see. Interesting.
So they do in some way change the way that humans function once we get this viral DNA?
They have the potential to give us a template to work with evolutionarily.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So I'm saying to your question, yes, but in more of a beating around the bush evolutionary scientific context.
So we don't really know, like, in what way acquiring these viruses changed us in the past?
So we do. We know now because, we can look in the past because the genome sequences are there. So we can look in the past by looking at the viruses. So there's a term for this, and it's called paleovirology.
Wow.
So we can look at these sequences that are in our DNA now, and we can say, well, this gives us a means to understand sort of how viruses were circulating in the population, 100,000, a million years ago.
Okay.
And how they interacted with their hosts then. And so, but as far as new infections, there's no way for us to really, the evolution is not directed. And so there's not really a way for us to tell what will happen in the future, but we can look at ourselves now and we can retrospectively look at the past.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to note that this process has been going on literally as long as there's been organisms, multicellular organisms.
Right, not people.
Yeah.
We were before we were people.
Yeah, even before there were multicellular organisms, the viruses this is their thing. This is what they've been doing the whole time. There's been life on Earth.
I would agree with that, yes.
Yeah, cool. Well, Dr. Halo, thank you very much. It's been fascinating.
Yes.
Great. Thank you for this opportunity.
You're welcome. Is there anything you'd like to part with or let our listeners hear just before you go?
No, other than wash your hands,
Okay.
use sanitizer, and be very mindful and respectful of others around you.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Halo, and hopefully maybe we can have you on in the future to talk about some other virally related things.
Yes.
I'd be happy to come back anytime. I thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that was a very interesting dive into virology. And I think that it's always helpful to actually look at and study the things that you're afraid of. I find that very useful.
Do you remember what DNA stands for? Was it deoxyribonucleic acid?
That's exactly it. Yep.
And what is RNA? Is this ribonucleic acid?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Without the deoxy. All right.
Right. Yeah. No.
Does it have something to do with oxygen?
I think we can safely assume that. Yes.
Probably.
Yeah.
You would think. The word's right in there. Yeah. Okay.
Right. So, so that was interesting. What did you think of what Dr. Halo had to say? You can join us at 866-240-1065 to talk about what she was talking about, or any environmental or ecological topic, or still any signs of spring. We're looking for signs of spring from the audience, things that you folks have seen that would make all of us just go a little like, oh, that's nice, because I think we need some of that right now.
We're desperate. We're tired of. We need something else. Other stimulation. We're tired of the live streaming. We've live streamed everything good already.
Right. But one good thing that we have for a Green Future are our sponsors.
Yay!
And our For a Green Future is brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces. They provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature, restore wildlife habitats, and they lead you on outdoor adventures. The Wood County Parks protects 20 parks and nature preserves all around Wood County, which are open from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. And there's several ways you can get a hold of them. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. Another is go to their terrific website, which is wcparks.org. And third, and I recommend this personally, is go to their app store and download their app. It's just called WC Parks. And once you've got that on your phone, you can always, in normal times, you can always say, oh, what kind of activities are happening at the Wood County Parks? And you could get a list and find out when and where things are going on. Of course, these are not normal times, but still download the app. There's some pretty pictures on there that people have taken at Wood County Parks of various pretty things. And of course, as they say, you can get out into the parks. Go on out and take a walk, whatever your local park is, go around the block.
And the state parks, too. I looked it up, and Ohio state parks are open, but a lot of the lodges and offices and restaurants and such like are closed.
Right. And also the Wood County Parks, they put out a press release saying that while the parks are open, the playgrounds are closed because,
There we go. A lot of places are doing that.
Yeah, kids tend to get things on surfaces on playgrounds.
And if you're having trouble with the social distancing while in the park, you got to pass somebody on the path or something. Wear hula hoops around your, just kind of make it so
Really?
suspended from your neck.
Oh, okay.
If everyone does this, actually, it'll be the 6 feet, so it'll be great. Or
I think maybe something coming from a hat would be better because you don't want to put things around your neck.
Good point. Or like if you have a dog on a leash, it's kind of safe to let the two dogs meet.
Yeah, well,
because you have enough.
The problem, though, of course, is that dogs also attract people.
Yeah, that's true.
I have a really cute dog, and even in these times, people seem to can't help themselves. They have to come up and pet her.
So if you're going to adopt, get an ugly dog, maybe one of those Chinese cresteds.
Yeah, really ugly dogs. Those are good for keeping social distance.
Something that looks like it might have mange.
There's also just sticks, 6-foot sticks, like a bamboo. I was watching, because we're closed in, we watched Chitty Chitty Bang Bang the other night. And
oh, excellent.
Dick Van Dyke was there with his old bamboo pole, and I said, oh, that's just about 6 feet.
Yeah.
If I had one of those, that'd be perfect.
There we go.
But, so, and also, in addition to our sponsors, we have our patrons.
Yay.
And these are people who have gone to patreon.com and saw our page there on patreon.com where they were able to sign up to make a small monthly donation. It comes out of the checking account automatically. You don't feel it or notice it, except for that once a week when you get to hear the show, when we get that really warm feeling and like, hey, I helped bring that information to the people.
It's my show. I'm invested.
Right. And so we're extremely grateful for our patrons. And all they had to do was go to patreon.com and search for a Green Future. And then, that's one of the reasons we're able to bring you this show. So thank you very much to our patrons. Now, on to environmental news and information that you don't hear other places. And I picked out a story, plucked it out of the news stream. This comes from the Daily News, which is the paper of the Longview, Washington, in Washington State. And this doesn't seem like an earth-shaking story at the front. I mean, it's really kind of just a short little thing. The environmental department, that's called Ecology there in Washington State, has approved the use of a pesticide called Imazamax. It sounds like an Italian pesticide, doesn't it? Imazamax. Right?
A little bit.
Imazamax.
Are you actually a Zamax?
Imazamax. But it's an herbicide, and they have approved the use of this herbicide in ocean farming in order to kill Japanese eelgrass, because there are clam farms there along the coast of Washington, and this Japanese eelgrass, which is an invasive species, can come in and it kind of smothers the clam beds.
Yeah.
But the reason this one caught my eye, and the reason I'm thinking about it or thought I'd bring it up on today's show, is this whole notion of ocean farming the ocean.
You can't. Your fences don't work good for ocean farming mostly.
No, that's true. And there have been many instances where, let's say, they had salmon or something like that in pens, and the pens break because there's a storm or something, and all of a sudden there's this flood of this genetically weak salmon pouring out into an environment where it's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
And there's also the fact that when you farm animals in the ocean, in these pens or on these artificial beds, you are concentrating them in a way that they do not concentrate in nature. And so other things get concentrated too, like the wastes from those animals. And that can cause eutrophication, which is, bacterial blooms and things, and that can really upset the local ecology. And so, if you've got a farm-raised critters in conjunction with wild critters, almost invariably the farm-raised critters degrade the wild communities that are around them. And so what we have here is an example of just how far this negative impact of sea farming, of ocean farming can go. They're actually spraying herbicides in the ocean.
Oh, boy.
I mean, we're always concerned about the idea that herbicides and pesticides can get into waterways. And here's an example in Washington
just
State.
Inject them directly.
Forget that whole runoff thing, and, we're just going to go right to the ocean and just start spraying these herbicides and pesticides. And the ironic thing about it, the reason that I think it's so important to bring this up and talk about this is that these farmed creatures, like the farmed salmon, they're not as nutritious and they don't taste as good because they're raised in these little pens and they don't have the clean water flowing over them constantly the way wild stocks do. And the other thing is that it's actually less efficient than harvesting wild fish.
Wow.
Because you're putting in tons of energy, you're putting in tons of chemicals. Yeah, you're concentrating everything right there, so it's all easy to harvest. And it's also easy to say, this is mine, these are my salmon in this pen. But in terms of the amount of biomass, in terms of the amount of harvest and food you can get out of a system, it's much more efficient to let the entire system operate, to let the wild plants grow, to let the algae grow, and let the fish feed on those algae naturally. They get healthier, the populations are larger, and as long as you don't over-harvest, and this is the key, as long as your harvests are within limits that can be sustained, you will get more fish out of the same area for the same amount of time and energy. And this principle that if you let the natural systems act naturally and then just take the bounty, just skim off the top.
Get your boat and go and find them.
Right. Don't touch the principle. Don't harvest them so much that they start to crash, which is something else.
The interest.
That's exactly. You're living off the interest because these populations can take predation. They can be harvested. That's what's been happening to them the entire time there's been fish. There have been things eating fish. Like
the thing where you don't harvest animals during the breeding season.
Right. Exactly. So you just follow some rules. You accept the limits of an ecosystem. So it's like, okay, we can harvest 500 tons a year. All right, that's all we're going to harvest. But if you do that, you end up with more food and better food. And so the idea of turning the ocean into farms, to taking what we've done to the terrestrial ecosystems and environment, and then just doing that to the ocean ecosystems, that is a recipe for disaster, because we are utterly dependent on the health of the ocean ecosystems.
Right.
If the oceans start dying en masse, we won't make it. This society, this culture, our continued survival is dependent on having healthy oceans.
So I would think it would get expensive when the ocean periodically just, slaps your little farm away with something or other. Get hurricanes, tsunamis, whatever, Yeah. Oceans are moody that way.
That's true. I mean, and if you were doing the wild stocks, that wouldn't be a problem for you.
They would just go do whatever fish do during hurricanes and tsunamis.
They would. They have their behaviors. They would adapt, and And, you'd still have fish after a hurricane.
Right.
But yes, your fish farm could be wiped out by a hurricane or a tsunami or something like that. So, and, fishing has been in human culture pretty much as long as there's been human culture.
Maybe longer. Other critters were whatever we were before we were human might have been doing some fishing too.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. Some of our hominid ancestors probably also did. I'm sure they did actually fish. So I'm not saying leave the poor fish alone, never touch them. They have to swim free. I'm saying yes, we harvest wild fish, and this whole notion of fish farming, I think we're going to have to abandon this. I
just act like you have some sense, is what Joe is saying to people who want to make money off fish.
Yeah. So just a little story in a little paper in Washington State, but it allowed me to go on a big rant. So what do you think? Do you agree with me that fish farming is not the way to go, or still looking for those signs of spring at 866-240-1065? We're at 8:48, and time is rushing along. We have also our regular feature, which is the letter from the future.
Boy.
I've got one right here. Okay. And this is the letter from my great-great-granddaughter, Marie I., who's living about 300 years in the future. Dear great-great-grandpa, the birds are back. Once again, the bay near our drilling site near Zapolyarny is alive with the sound of birds. Honking swans, rooks with their raucous cries, gulls, and a dozen other species are making such a din that Michael and I had to shout to each other as we watched them flying up from the south and landing in the bay. Now that I'm pregnant, I'm feeling a special affinity for the female birds I'm seeing. They're soon going to be taking care of chicks in their nests just the way I will be with my baby. It was while we were out bird watching that I finally told Michael that I'm pregnant. I've been worried that having someone else's child would change his feelings for me. He was definitely shocked. After I told him, he didn't say anything, and we walked along in silence for almost an hour. I was burning to ask him what he felt, but I knew that he had to work that out for himself. At last he said, I was so frantic about losing you during that whole crisis on Mars. I just can't imagine pushing you away myself over this.
Aw.
I guess I should be upset about this, but I'm really happy to have you back, and I'm happy for you. I flung my arms around him, and we kissed with the birds flying all around us. Walking back hand in hand was the happiest I've been in many, many months. I also told Bill Ryderson that was not nearly as happy for me. We were in the holograph room. He had ignored my requests for a meeting for all week. I could tell that he was broadcasting from a cramped little room with no privacy because other people kept straying into the edges of his hologram area. It was very annoying. He looked like a shadow of the man he had been, once so tall and straight, now hunched over. There were lines on his face, and I saw gray in his hair where I didn't remember seeing any just a month ago. He was overjoyed. He brightened up immensely once he understood what I was telling him. He's already sent me dozens of articles on how to have a healthy pregnancy. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to handle his attentions for the next months. I may have to tell him to cool it. Everyone else is lavishing attention on me, too. I think every single person here at the drill site, scientists and staff alike, has come up to me and congratulated me personally. It's a little overwhelming. I'm glad I found time to write you, though, GGG. Talk to you next week. Love, Marie I.
Oh, so that's nice. Things are working out.
Things are going well up there in the future. And, we're all heading there. We're not there yet, but we'll get there. Don't worry. There will be a green future. That's one of the whole purposes of this show, is to let people know we're going to make it. We're going to adjust to these things. We're going to change our behaviors. I mean, we've seen just in the past month how we can radically change our behaviors once we're motivated to do it, and once we have the information that we can change and the leadership. And so the changes that we need to make to have a green future aren't as radical as what we're already doing this month, this week.
Another sign of hope besides spring that I feel like I've been seeing is, well, of course, disasters bring out the best and the worst in people. That's a thing.
Mm-hmm, true.
But yeah, a lot of people are trying to get together and find out what their neighbors need. Like, okay, I have this. Does someone else need it? I need this. Does someone else have it?
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of almost like a barter economy, but also kind of conscious attention to what do we as the group need to get to individuals.
Yeah, we did a little bit of that. Our neighbors needed some white vinegar. We managed to find some, and in gratitude, they gave us a package of toilet paper.
There you go. Yeah,
And
I got a ride to the grocery store the other day, which we needed pretty badly, and in exchange for that, somebody next door who I'd let them use my phone had given me a package of some kind of bacterial wipes. So I gave them to this lady who's working to try and help other people out to give to whatever nursing home staff, hospital staff, people like that who desperately need this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that comes over. You said it brings out the best and the worst in people,
right?
But I think that it brings out more of the best than the worst. I mean, I think people are acting in a very responsible manner right now.
If we can get people in the habit of thinking, okay, what's good for us as a group? What is not, short term, I see a bunch of stuff, I want it, how can I get more and more kind of what is good long term for us as a group? Then that could really make us into a different society and into different people.
I think so, too. And the key is to start acting in that manner without the impetus of a horrible disease bearing down on you.
Just if this is woken you up to that, keep going with it.
Yeah.
Even if the horrible disease is gone, if things go back to normal, it doesn't. It can have the good features of the crisis without the crisis. That would be nice.
Yeah. One thing that I'm actually seeing when Carol and I were out taking our walk the other day, parents are actually telling their kids to go outside and play.
Right.
I mean, they're stuck in the house with the kids almost indefinitely here, and some of them are responding by saying, go outside. And so I'm actually seeing kids out in the yard running around, and that's kind of inspiring. I think that some people are actually finally reaching video game saturation and actually finally saying, you know what, I've been staring at these virtual things too long. I got to go look at something real.
Yeah, my parents did that whenever they just wanted to get rid of us instead of giving us videos to watch. So,
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's another way you can get your kids out of your hair.
Yeah, and it works great. So how are you folks coping at 866-240-1065? We have time for one call. If you want to be that one caller that we're so grateful for on this show, we're waiting for you at 866-240-1065. But we're not going to wait too much because we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. Rebecca, I believe you did some research about something interesting, something you can find in the spring, which is Ohio's state flower.
Yeah, I've been seeing little flowers here and there, birds. So I got thinking about flowers, and I looked at something called the Eastern White Trillium, which is Ohio's state wildflower. In fact, Anybody out there, you should find out what your state wildflower is. They're cool. But yeah, I guess they like forest soils. They like well drained, a lot of calcium in the bedrock.
Mm-hmm.
And the range is more or less from northern Quebec in the north, Appalachian Mountains in the east, northern Georgia in the south, and all the way to Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And you should not pick them if you see them. They're real pretty, but don't pick them because you'll take off the bracts. Okay. Mm. Interesting fact, a leaf, when it's on a flower, is called a bract.
Okay.
Apparently. I did not know this. I thought they were just leaves like leaves on a tree.
Right.
But yeah, if you do that, the whole plant will die because that's its way of getting food from the sunlight.
Okay.
And they're ephemeral, which means that they just appear for a minute in the spring and then they look like they go away. But in fact, there's this huge root structure and rhizomes and all that stuff under the ground.
Mm-hmm. You
destroy that if you pick them.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And a good place you can go see this is Clifton Gorge. This is State Nature Preserve, which is near Dayton in Greene County. And really the best time will be coming up in April or May, so plan now. Take a lot of food with you. Don't stop at gas stations unless you have to.
Yeah,
but, yeah.
I've seen trillium in the local woods too.
I guess Clifton Gorge is especially good, but you can go,
Clifton Gorge is beautiful.
go out in any good wood in Toledo and have fun looking for them. Yeah, probably find some.
Yeah, and I think you can find some in some of the metro parks actually.
No doubt,
in Toledo. And it's trillium, so three big petals on the flower, and then I believe there's 3 green leaves,
and they're kind of
alternating with the petals.
The bracts, not
right,
leaves.
The bract. I'm sorry, I used the wrong word.
It's one of those words you tend to spit when you say. Leaves is nicer, but they come out like in a little sort of a shape around the central blossom, which is they're very prettily arranged.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're coming up on some very pretty times here because it's looking like this is going to be a really good spring for flowers.
Excellent.
Some years we get it looks like it's going to be spring, and then all of a sudden, bam, we get some winter again, and like the flowers don't quite make it. But I think this year, we're going to have a lot of flowers to look at, and that's a cool thing. All right, well, another cool thing, I believe, is that we have managed to spend another hour with you folks out there and in the internet and in the radio land. And thank you very much. Rebecca and I are extremely grateful that you're listening, and we hope you've found what we've had to say interesting this week. And we'll be back next week with more of For a Green Future. This is Joe DeMare
and Rebecca Wood
signing off.
The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more 3-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun